Every morning at 8 o'clock sharp, I perform a life-saving miracle. It doesn't involve lightning or divine intervention. It comes in the form of a tiny, round, white pill. It's an anticonvulsant for my 7-year-old son, Leo. This little pill isn't just medicine, it's a shield. It stands between him and the terrifying, chaotic electrical storm in his brain that is epilepsy. I watch him take it every morning, swallowing it down with a glass of orange juice, and every time he does, I feel a wave of profound relief, a quiet, grateful prayer to the marvels of modern medicine. This pill allows my son to be a normal kid. It allows him to run in the park, to climb on the jungle gym, to live without the constant fear of his own body betraying him in a violent, terrifying seizure. This tiny pill is the gatekeeper of our peace, which is why my mother-in-law's words last Sunday felt like a physical blow. She was watching us go through our morning ritual, her face a mask of sweet, grandmotherly concern. As Leo swallowed his pill, she sighed and said, loud enough for me to hear, I just pray that little chemical isn't doing more long-term harm than good. Laura, the body knows how to heal itself. If we just let it. That one sentence. It was a perfect encapsulation of the quiet, insidious war I had been fighting for the past 3 years. A war of whispers, of shared articles from dubious wellness blogs, of helpful suggestions that were actually vicious critiques of my parenting. A war against the unshakable, fanatical belief of my in-laws, Carol and Robert, that I was slowly poisoning their only grandchild. If you have ever had in-laws who think they know how to raise your child better than you do, who disguise their constant, undermining criticism as loving concern, you know the specific, boiling rage I'm talking about. Go ahead and smash that like button if you've ever wanted to scream. I am the parent here because you are my people. Leo was diagnosed with a generalized seizure disorder when he was 4. It was the most terrifying period of my life, watching your child's body go rigid. His eyes roll back in his head, his limbs jerking uncontrollably. There is no horror like it. It feels like watching a thief steal your child right in front of you. We spent months in and out of hospitals, seeing specialists, running tests. The diagnosis was devastating, but it came with a solution, a daily medication regimen that would, in all likelihood, control the seizures completely. And it worked. It was a miracle. Within a month of starting the medication, the seizures stopped. My happy, vibrant, funny little boy came back from the fog. He could go to preschool. He could have playdates. He could be a kid. My husband, David, and I were endlessly, profoundly grateful. His parents, however, were horrified. Carol and Robert weren't just skeptical of modern medicine. They were openly hostile to it. They were disciples of the Church of All Natural, organic, homeopathic everything. Their home smelled perpetually of lavender and eucalyptus from the essential oil diffusers that hummed in every room. Their answer to everything was a special tea, a restrictive diet, or a positive affirmation. In their world, sickness was a sign of imbalance, a failure of positive thinking, and a chronic condition like epilepsy that was a spiritual crisis. When we told them about Leo's diagnosis and the medication that was saving his life, they didn't offer support. They offered judgment. Epilepsy, Robert had said, shaking his head gravely as if I'd just told him Leo had joined a cult. It's a blockage of energy, probably from all the toxins in his food. You need to get him off all processed sugars immediately, and gluten, and dairy. There's a tincture for that, Carol had added, her eyes wide with the zeal of a true believer. It's made from frankincense and purified spring water. It realigns the body's electrical field. A few drops under the tongue every day. And you'll see, way better than those pharmaceuticals. Who knows what the side effects are? In the beginning, I tried to be patient. I tried to explain the science, the neurology. I showed them the EEGs, the brain scans that showed the abnormal electrical activity. I explained that this was not a matter of diet or energy fields. It was a matter of chemistry and biology. It was like talking to a brick wall, a very condescending brick wall that smelled faintly of patchouli. Their campaign of whispers started soon after. It was a relentless, passive-aggressive assault on my competence as a mother. Carol would come over and I'd find her rubbing some calming blend of essential oils on Leo's temples while he slept. It helps with the neurological stress. dear," she'd say with a sweet smile. Robert would email me a dozen articles a week from websites with names like Healthy Self, Net, and HTTPS, www.google.com, Sopra, Search, Cute Sex, Big Pharma Lies, com, with headlines like How the Ketogenic Diet Cured One Boy's Seizures Forever. They never confronted me directly. It was always a suggestion, a shared article, a helpful tip. They were painting me as a lazy, ignorant mother who was choosing the easy path of modern medicine instead of putting in the real work to truly heal her son. And my husband, David, he was caught in the middle. I need to be fair to David. He doesn't believe any of their nonsense. He's a software engineer. He's a man of logic and data. He trusts the doctors. He loves our son, and he tries. He really does. But he is a quiet man. He is a man who hates confrontation his entire life. He has been conditioned to placate his overbearing parents. I would witness their arguments. David would be calm, rational. Mom, Dad, we've talked about this. We are following the neurologist's advice. The medication is working. Please just drop it. But they wouldn't drop it. They would steamroll him. We're just concerned, David, his mother would say, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. He's our grandson. We can't just stand by and watch his mother pump him full of chemicals because she won't even try a simple dietary change. It's not a simple change, Mom. It's a medically supervised diet that's usually a last resort. It's just love, son, his father would say, putting a hand on his shoulder. We're just coming from a place of love. Can't you see that? And David, after 20 minutes of this, would eventually just sigh, run a hand through his hair, and retreat. He would come back to me, his face a mask of frustration. I tried. Laura, he'd say, I really did. They just don't listen. They're crazy. Trying isn't enough, I'd tell him, my own frustration boiling over. Why can't you just put your foot down? Why can't you tell them? If you mention this one more time, you won't be seeing Leo for a month. Why can't you set a real boundary? It's not that simple. He'd say, they're my parents. And that was always the end of it. I loved my husband, but his quiet, non-confrontational nature felt like a liability in this war. It felt like I was the only one on the front lines, fighting every single day to protect my son from the people who were supposed to love him most. I felt angry, and I felt utterly alone. For 2 years, we existed in this state of tense equilibrium. Leo was healthy, happy, and seizure-free on his medication, and his grandparents were a constant, buzzing source of anxiety in the background, a cloud of judgment that never quite went away. I learned to manage them. I would intercept the mail so I could throw away the articles Robert sent. I would politely decline Carol's gifts of healing crystals and herbal supplements. I was the family gatekeeper, the guardian of my son's health against their well-intentioned, but profoundly dangerous, ignorance. I thought I could handle it. I thought that as long as I was vigilant, I could keep their influence at bay. I thought that as long as Leo was taking his little white pill every morning, he would be safe. I was so wrong. I didn't know it yet, but the war of whispers was about to escalate, and the next battle would not be fought with shared articles or condescending comments. It would be fought with my son's life, and I was about to find out just how quiet and how deadly my husband could truly be when the person he loved most was threatened. But first, things had to get worse, so much worse. The equilibrium was shattered on a Tuesday. The in-laws were scheduled to come over that weekend to babysit while David and I attended a wedding. It was the first time in over a year that we were leaving Leo with them overnight. I was a nervous wreck about it, but David had insisted. They'll be fine, Laura, he'd said. They know the rules. I'll go over his medication schedule with them 5 times. It's one night. What's the worst that could happen? I wish I could go back in time to that moment, to the woman I was. I would grab her by the shoulders, shake her, and scream into her face, "Don't you do it. Don't you ever trust them with him." But I didn't. I let my husband's reassurances and my own exhaustion win. I packed Leo's little overnight bag, including his carefully organized pill caddy with his life-saving medication, and I prepared myself for a weekend of constant, low-grade anxiety, never imagining the true horror that was waiting for us when we returned. I thought the worst that could happen was that they'd feed him too much organic kale. I had no idea that the real danger wasn't what they would put into his body, but what they would take out. We picked Leo up from my in-laws' house on Sunday evening. The house smelled, as it always did, of roasted chicken and self-satisfaction. Carol and Robert were beaming, full of stories about what a perfect angel their grandson had been. He didn't have a single fussy moment, Carol announced proudly, handing me Leo's little dinosaur backpack. We had him on a completely clean diet all weekend, no sugar, no gluten, and we diffused our special anti-inflammatory blend of oils in his room while he slept. See? He's thriving. I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. Leo did seem fine, happily chattering about the new wooden train set his grandparents had bought him. Oh, and dear, Carol said, handing me the plastic, 7-day pill caddy. I went ahead and refilled this for you for the coming week, just to save you a job. Thank you, Carol, I said, my voice tight. That's very thoughtful. I took the pill caddy, the small plastic box now feeling strangely heavy in my hand. At the time, I saw it as just another small, infuriating instance of her overstepping her boundaries, of her need to have control over every aspect of Leo's care. I had no idea that what I was holding was not an act of misplaced helpfulness, but a declaration of war. I had no idea I was holding a box full of lies. The first sign that something was wrong came 2 days later. On Tuesday afternoon, Leo and I were sitting on the floor, building a massive Lego tower. He was in the middle of telling me a very elaborate story about a space pirate. His face animated, his eyes bright, and then he just stopped. Mid-sentence, his eyes went blank. He stared off into the middle distance, his hands frozen over a Lego brick. A tiny, almost imperceptible flutter touched his eyelids. Leo, I said, my heart giving a painful lurch. Honey. He didn't respond. He was gone. It was an absence seizure, the first he'd had in over a year. It only lasted for about 10 seconds. Then he blinked, looked at me, and picked up his story exactly where he had left off. And so the space pirate blasted the asteroid with his laser. He had no idea it had even happened. But I did. A cold, familiar dread began to creep up my spine. I tried to rationalize it. He's just tired. He had a busy weekend. It's a one-off. Don't panic. But then it happened again the next day. And on Thursday, while he was eating his breakfast, I saw his hand begin to twitch. A small, rhythmic focal seizure that lasted for 30 seconds. The shield was breached. The monster I had thought we'd caged was starting to get through again. I did what the doctors had taught me. I documented everything. The date, the time, the type of seizure, the duration. By the end of the week, my neat, empty logbook was filled with terrifying new entries. I made an emergency appointment with his neurologist, Dr. Evans. The waiting room of a pediatric neurology clinic is a special kind of quiet hell. It's filled with parents who wear the same look on their faces, a permanent, low-grade terror mixed with a fierce, desperate hope. We sat there for an hour, Leo happily playing with the waiting room toys, oblivious, while I felt like I was going to vibrate out of my own skin with anxiety. Dr. Evans was a kind, brilliant woman who had been with us since the beginning. She listened patiently as I recounted the week's events, my voice shaking as I read from my logbook. She ran another EEG, which showed the same familiar patterns of abnormal electrical activity. But when she got the results from his blood work, she was baffled. "Laura, I don't understand this," she said, frowning at the report on her computer screen. "His blood levels of the medication are perfect. He's in the ideal therapeutic range. The dosage is correct. Based on these numbers, he shouldn't be having breakthrough seizures." She looked at me, her expression a mixture of sympathy and clinical inquiry. "Are you absolutely positive you're giving him the medication every single day, at the same time?" The question, as gentle as it was, felt like a slap. "Yes," I said, my voice sharp. "Of course. I am 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. every single day, without fail. I set an alarm. I have never, ever missed a dose." "I believe you," she said soothingly, "but medically, this doesn't make sense. The only explanation is that either the medication is suddenly not working for him, which is rare, or he's somehow not getting the full dose." She decided to increase his dosage slightly, and she sent us home with instructions to monitor him closely and call her immediately if things got worse. I left that appointment feeling worse than when I'd arrived. I felt lost, confused, and filled with a terrible, creeping self-doubt. Was I doing something wrong? Was I somehow messing up the dosage? The doctor's confusion only amplified my own fear. Of course, David told his parents about the appointment, and of course, my mother-in-law called me that evening. "Laura, dear," she said, her voice dripping with sanctimonious pity. "David told me about the doctor's visit. You poor thing, it must be so difficult for you to accept that the path you're on just isn't working. The doctor is just making a small adjustment to his dosage. Carol," I said through gritted teeth. "Of course, dear, more chemicals," she said with a sigh. "When the real solution is right there, in nature. I've been reading about the incredible healing properties of black seed oil. It's been shown to completely eliminate neurological inflammation. We could get some for Leo tomorrow. Don't you think it's time you at least tried something that is designed to heal him instead of just covering up the symptoms?" I felt a surge of rage so hot and so powerful I thought I might actually scream into the phone. "He has epilepsy, Carol," I snapped. "He doesn't have neurological inflammation. He needs medicine, not salad dressing." "Well, you don't have to be so hysterical," she said, her voice instantly turning cold and wounded. "I'm just trying to help my grandson. I'm coming from a place of love. I'm sorry you can't see that." And she hung up. The increased dosage didn't help, in fact. The seizures got worse. The following week was a living nightmare. On Tuesday, Leo had a complex partial seizure that left him disoriented and frightened for almost an hour. On Thursday, at school, he had a full-blown tonic-clonic, or grand mal, seizure, the one we had been free of for 3 years. The school called me, and I broke every traffic law getting there. I found him in the nurse's office, pale and exhausted, his little body limp with post-seizure fatigue. He looked at me, his eyes full of confusion and fear. "Mommy," he whispered. My brain feels fuzzy. That night, after I had put Leo to bed, I completely fell apart, and I took all my fear, my grief, and my rage out on the one person who was supposed to be my partner in this. My husband. He had retreated into his office after dinner. As he often did lately, he said he had work to do, but I knew it was an escape. He was hiding from the crisis that was engulfing our family. I stormed into his office, my hands clenched into fists. "Why are you not doing anything?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. "Our son had a grand mal seizure at school today, David. His medicine isn't working. The doctors don't know why. Your parents are calling me every day to tell me I'm a terrible mother who is poisoning him with chemicals. And you just sit in here and hide. You're not on my team." He looked up from his computer, his face weary. "Laura, what do you want me to do? I've spoken to my parents a dozen times. Yelling at them doesn't work. It just makes them dig in their heels. Then do something else," I cried, tears of frustration streaming down my face. "Scream at them, cut them off. Do something that shows them there are consequences for their behavior. I am fighting this war all by myself, and I feel like I'm losing my mind." "You're not losing your mind," he said, his voice quiet and maddeningly calm. "You're stressed. We're all stressed. And you're not alone. I am handling it." "Handling it?" I asked, my voice incredulous. "How are you possibly handling it? By being quiet, by watching. Your son is getting sicker and sicker, and your response is to be quiet. Your quiet isn't helping, David. It feels like you're not even here. It feels like you've abandoned us." "That's not fair," he said, his voice finally hardening. "And it's not true." "It feels true," I sobbed. "It feels like I'm the only one who is terrified enough, the only one who is fighting for him." The fight ended, as it always did, in a stalemate. I was too emotional. In his eyes, he was too passive. In mine, he retreated back into the quiet of his work, and I retreated into the noisy, chaotic prison of my own fear. The gulf between us had never felt wider. I was completely, utterly alone, with a sick child whose illness no one could explain. I went and sat on the floor by Leo's bed, just watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. He looked so small, so fragile. I felt a wave of maternal protectiveness so fierce it was a physical pain. I would do anything for him. I would fight anyone for him. And as I sat there in the dark, A new thought, a terrifying thought, a thought so monstrous I had been pushing it away for days, began to surface. The doctor's words echoed in my head. The only explanation is that either the medication is suddenly not working for him, or he's somehow not getting the full dose. My mind flashed to the pill caddy, the one Carol had so helpfully refilled. The seizures had started 2 days after we brought it home. No, I told myself, that's insane. She's his grandmother. She loves him. She would never, she couldn't. But the thought had taken root. An ugly, poisonous seed of suspicion. What if the medicine wasn't failing? What if the problem wasn't the dosage? What if the problem was the pills themselves? To live with a monstrous thought is a special kind of torture. It's a splinter in your mind that you can't pull out. Every waking moment is filtered through the lens of this new, horrifying possibility. The world, which was already a frightening place, becomes a house of mirrors where every reflection is distorted, and you can't trust what you see. That was my life for the next week. I became a paranoid spy in my own home. Every time my mother-in-law, Carol, called to ask how Leo was doing, her voice dripping with syrupy concern, I heard a sinister subtext. Every helpful article Robert emailed me about the dangers of overmedication felt like a threat. They weren't just misguided, they were suspects, and I was the sole, terrified detective on a case I couldn't even speak aloud. My first move was to investigate the pills themselves. Late one night, after David and Leo were asleep, I went into the kitchen. My hands were shaking. I felt like a criminal. I took out the plastic pill caddy that Carol had so helpfully refilled. I also took out the new, sealed bottle of Leo's medication that I had just picked up from the pharmacy. I emptied the contents of one of the capsules from the caddy onto a piece of clean white paper. It was a fine, white, crystalline powder. Then, I carefully opened a capsule from the sealed pharmacy bottle and emptied it onto the paper beside the first pile. I stared at the 2 small piles of white powder under the bright glare of the kitchen light. They looked identical, the exact same color, the exact same texture. In a moment of desperate, half-mad curiosity, tasted a tiny speck from each pile on the tip of my tongue. They were both slightly bitter, chalky. There was no discernible difference. A wave of something that felt like relief, but was actually shame, washed over me. I was losing my mind. The stress, the fear, the lack of sleep, it had all conspired to make me a paranoid, delusional wreck. How could I have thought something so monstrous Carol was overbearing? Yes, she was a fanatic when it came to her natural lifestyle. But she was Leo's grandmother. She loved him. She would never, ever actively harm him. I was the one who was crazy. I carefully swept the powder into the trash, my face burning with shame. I went to bed that night feeling guilty and deeply unsettled, not by my in-laws, but by the dark places my own mind had taken me. But a mother's intuition is a powerful, primal thing. It's a gut feeling that operates on a level deeper than logic. And my gut was still screaming at me that something was wrong. My in-laws came to visit that weekend. I tried to be normal. I tried to push the horrible thought away. I tried to see them as David did, as his loving, if misguided, parents. I failed. I watched Carol like a hawk. Every move she made seemed calculated, sinister. When she hugged Leo, was she checking his temperature, looking for signs of illness when she offered to help me in the kitchen? Was she trying to get access to his medicine cabinet? I felt like I was going insane, second-guessing every interaction, searching for clues in every innocent gesture. The moment that solidified my fear came on Saturday afternoon. Leo was down for his nap. I was in the living room, trying to read a book, my mind a million miles away. Carol announced she was going to make a pot of her special calming chamomile tea for everyone. She went into the kitchen. A few minutes later, I got up to get a glass of water. I walked into the kitchen silently, and I saw her. She was standing by the counter where we kept the medicine cabinet. She wasn't making tea. She was just standing there, her back to me. Her purse was on the counter, open, and she had her hand inside it. She didn't seem to be getting anything out. She just seemed to be standing there. She must have heard me because she startled. Quickly zipping her purse shut, she turned to me, a bright, flustered smile on her face. "Oh, Laura, you scared me," she said, with a little laugh. "I was just looking for a mint." My goodness. But I had seen her expression in the split second before she'd noticed me. It wasn't the expression of a woman looking for a mint. It was the expression of a woman who had been caught doing something she shouldn't. It was a look of guilt. She quickly busied herself with the tea kettle, her movements a little too fast, a little too jerky. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding. It wasn't proof. It was nothing a lawyer could use, nothing I could even properly articulate. But it was enough. The splinter in my mind was back, and it was sharper than ever. That night, after they had gone home, I knew I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I had to know. I was a woman of science, a pharmacist before I became a mother. I needed data. I decided to run my own, simple, secret experiment. Once again, I waited until David and Leo were asleep. I went back into the kitchen. I took out the pill caddy. I looked at the little box marked Monday a.m. Inside was the small white capsule that was supposed to protect my son. My plan was simple. Pills, even identical-looking ones, are made of different chemical compounds. They behave differently when introduced to a solvent. I took 2 small, identical glass tumblers. Into the first glass, I dropped the capsule from Monday morning's slot in the caddy, the pill that had come from my mother-in-law. Into the second glass, I dropped a capsule that I took directly from the sealed pharmacy bottle. I then filled both glasses with exactly 4 ounces of warm water, and I watched. The capsule from the pharmacy bottle, the real medication, behaved as I expected. The gelatin shell dissolved slowly, and the white powder inside began to disperse into the water, turning it cloudy and opaque. It was a suspension. The active ingredient and the binding agents were mixing with the water. But the other glass was different. The gelatin shell of the pill from Carol's caddy dissolved much faster, and the white powder inside didn't make the water cloudy. It didn't create a suspension. It just disappeared. It dissolved completely, leaving the water as clear and as transparent as it had been before. I stared at the 2 glasses side by side on my kitchen counter. One was a cloudy, milky white. The other was perfectly clear. It was sugar or salt or some other simple, water-soluble compound. It was a placebo, a dummy pill, a fake. The proof was right in front of me, stark and undeniable. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. My monstrous, unthinkable thought was true. My mother-in-law, my son's own grandmother, was actively, methodically, and secretly switching out his life-saving medication for sugar pills. She was leaving my child unprotected, vulnerable, a ticking time bomb, all to prove her own twisted, dangerous theories. The validation was immediately followed by a wave of terror so profound I had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. This was real. This was happening. I had to tell David. He had to believe me now. I had proof. I left the 2 glasses on the counter as my evidence. I ran into our bedroom, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and vindication. I shook him awake. "David, wake up. You have to come see this." He sat up, groggy and confused. "What, Laura? What's wrong? Is it Leo?" "No, he's fine," I said, my voice shaking. "But you have to come to the kitchen. Now, I can prove it." Confused, he followed me into the brightly lit kitchen. I pointed a trembling finger at the 2 glasses on the counter. "Look," I said, my voice frantic. "Look at them. The cloudy one is a real pill from the pharmacy. The clear one is from the pill caddy your mother filled for us. Do you see? They're different. She's switching them." "David. She's been switching out his pills." He stared at the 2 glasses, his face a mask of sleepy confusion. He looked at me, at my wild eyes, my frantic expression. "Laura, what are you talking about?" he said slowly. "The pills," I insisted. Grabbing his arm, "She's replacing them with fakes. That's why Leo is getting sick. It's not the medicine failing, it's her. She's trying to prove her insane theories, and she's using our son as a lab rat." He just stared at me, and in his eyes, I didn't see belief. I didn't see understanding. I saw pity, and I saw fear, not fear of his mother, but fear for me. "Honey," he said, his voice the soft, placating tone one uses with someone who is unwell. "It's 3 a.m. What is this? Some kind of home science experiment?" "It's proof, David," I cried. "Proof of what?" he asked, his voice still gentle, but with an edge of frustration. That 2 pills dissolve differently in water, Laura. It could be anything, a different generic manufacturer, different inert binding agents. That doesn't mean it's a sugar pill. That is a huge, monstrous leap. It's not a leap, I saw her. She was at the medicine cabinet. She was acting strange. My gut has been telling me this for weeks. Your gut, he said. And now his voice was hardening. Laura, listen to yourself. You are under an incredible, unimaginable amount of stress. You're not sleeping. You're terrified for our son. I get it. But you cannot start making these insane accusations against my mother. It's not rational. It is rational, I sobbed. The last of my hope beginning to crumble. You're not listening to me. No. You're not listening to reason, he said. His voice finally rising. You are talking about my mother. The woman who loves Leo, who would do anything for him. You are accusing her of something a monster would do. It's crazy, Laura. You sound crazy. Crazy. The word landed, and the world went silent again. He thought I was crazy. He looked at the evidence before him. He looked at his frantic, terrified wife, and his conclusion was that I had lost my mind. He chose to believe in the sanity of his mother, who peddled dangerous, anti-science nonsense, over the sanity of his own wife. He had abandoned me, utterly and completely. I looked at his face, at his genuine concern for my mental state, and I felt the last of my strength drain away. I was alone. I was completely, utterly, terrifyingly alone. I was the sole guardian of my son against a danger that no one else in the world, not even my own husband, could see. I stopped crying. I just stared at him, a vast empty canyon opening up between us. Okay, David, I said, my voice a dead, hollow whisper. You're right. I'm sorry I woke you. I'm just tired. I'm not thinking clearly. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there with the 2 glasses of water, the evidence of his mother's crime and his own profound betrayal. The days following my fight with David were the loneliest of my life. We were 2 ghosts haunting the same house. Our conversations reduced to curt, necessary exchanges about Leo. Did you give him his morning dose? Yes. Is his pediatrician appointment confirmed for Thursday? Yes. The warmth and partnership that had been the bedrock of our marriage was gone, replaced by a cold, brittle silence. I felt like I was suffocating. I was trapped in an impossible situation. I was living with a man who thought I was losing my mind, while trying to protect our son from the very people my husband was defending. I felt a despair so profound it was a physical weight, a constant pressure behind my eyes. I was at war, and my own commanding officer thought I was a traitor. My in-laws, emboldened by David's defense of them, ramped up their campaign. Carol now called daily, her voice a syrupy blend of fake sympathy and I told you so superiority. Laura, dear, I was just reading a fascinating study. She said over the phone on Tuesday. It was about a boy in Germany whose seizures were completely cured after his parents eliminated all electromagnetic frequencies from their home. They turned off the Wi-Fi at night. Have you considered that it's so simple? Our son's medical care is being handled by his neurologist. Carol, I said, my voice a monotone. Of course, dear, she sighed. I'm just praying for you, praying that you'll open your heart to true, natural healing for that precious boy before it's too late. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. Before it's too late. The words felt like a threat. I sank onto the sofa, my head in my hands, feeling the last of my fight draining out of me. They were going to win. They were going to wear me down with their whispers and their articles and their insane, dangerous theories until I had nothing left. Maybe David was right. Maybe I was the one who was crazy. That evening, David came home and found me in the exact same spot on the sofa, just staring into space. He saw the look of utter, hollowed-out defeat on my face. He put his briefcase down, loosened his tie, and sat down in the armchair opposite me. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with unspoken resentment and grief. He watched me for a long time, and then he said the words that changed everything. I am so sorry, Laura. I didn't respond. I had heard his apologies before. They were meaningless. No, he said, as if reading my mind. Not for the fight, for what I said, for calling you crazy. That was unforgivable. You are the sanest, strongest person I have ever known. And I failed you. I am so sorry." His voice was different. The defensiveness was gone. In its place was a deep, profound regret that sounded real. I finally looked at him. His eyes were full of a pain that mirrored my own. "I need to show you something," he said quietly. "But first, I need to explain. You're right. I've been quiet. I've been distant. And you think it's because I don't believe you, or because I'm not fighting. You're wrong. I've been fighting. I've just been fighting a different kind of war." I just stared at him. My curiosity piqued despite myself. "I started to suspect them too," he said. His voice a low, intense whisper. "Weeks ago, right after they babysat, when Leo had that first absence seizure, it didn't make any sense. The timing was too perfect. But Laura, I know my parents. They live in a fortress of denial and self-righteousness. If I had come to them with a suspicion, with your water glass experiment, they would have turned it around on us in a second." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "They would have said we were the crazy ones. They would have said you were a hysterical, overprotective mother who was seeing conspiracies everywhere. They would have said I was being brainwashed by you and Big Pharma. It would have been our word against theirs. And in their world, their word is the only one that matters. It would have just been another argument that went nowhere, but it would have put them on high alert. And it would have driven an even bigger wedge between you and me, which is what they want." My heart started to beat a little faster. He was making sense. "So," he continued, a grim, determined look on his face, "I decided to stop fighting them on their terms. I stopped arguing. I stopped trying to reason with them. Arguing with them is like punching water. It's pointless and exhausting. Instead, I decided to beat them at their own game. They deal in whispers and lies and things no one can prove. So I decided to deal in the one thing they can't deny, cold. Hard, irrefutable. Visual evidence. I didn't understand. What are you talking about?" He stood up. "Come with me." He led me to his office. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. He typed in a long, complex password. A folder appeared on his desktop. It was labeled simply, Project Nightingale. "For the past month, Laura," he said, turning to look at me, "I've been conducting my own surveillance." My jaw dropped. He opened the folder. It was filled with dozens of video files. Each one was named with a date and a time. Kitchen Cam Nov 15 14 power 30. Leos room Nov 15 15 Tharpras. "You installed cameras," I whispered, my voice full of disbelief. "2 of them," he said grimly. "Tiny ones. One is in the smoke detector in the kitchen, aimed right at the medicine cabinet. The other is in the digital clock on Leo's dresser. They're motion activated. They only record when someone is in the room. I've been reviewing the footage every single night after you go to sleep." He looked at me, his face full of a pain and anger that mirrored my own. "I needed to be sure. I needed to see it with my own eyes before I brought this to you. Because accusing your own mother of something like this, you have to be 1000% certain." He scrolled through the files. "I want you to watch this," he said, his voice low. "This is from last Saturday afternoon, while you were out in the garden with Leo, and my mother was supposedly making her calming chamomile tea." He double-clicked the file labeled Kitchen Cam Nov 28 15 12. The video filled the screen. It was a clear, wide-angle shot of our kitchen. The quality was perfect. A moment later, my mother-in-law, Carol, walked into the frame. She walked to the kitchen window and looked out, clearly checking to see where I was, satisfied that I was occupied. She turned back to the counter. My heart was in my throat. I watched as she calmly picked up the plastic 7-day pill caddy. She opened it. Then, she reached into her large, expensive handbag, the one she always carried, and pulled out a small, unlabeled prescription bottle. I let out a small, strangled gasp. David put his hand on my shoulder. I watched, mesmerized with horror, as she performed the act with a practiced, methodical efficiency that was utterly chilling. She opened the compartment for Sunday morning. She tipped the small, white capsule, the real, life-saving medication, into the palm of her hand. Then she opened her own bottle, tipped out an identical-looking white capsule, and placed it into the empty compartment. She did it again for Sunday evening, then Monday morning, Monday evening. She went through the entire week. Her movements quick and precise. Her face a mask of intense, righteous concentration. This was not the act of a misguided, loving grandmother. This was the act of a saboteur, a criminal. When she was finished, she put the real pills she had removed into her own bottle, screwed the cap on, and dropped it back into her purse. She closed the pill caddy and placed it back on the counter, exactly where it had been. Then she turned to the sink and began to run the water for her tea. As if she had done nothing more sinister than wash her hands. The video played on, but I wasn't watching anymore. I was staring at the frozen image of her face on the screen, her expression one of quiet, determined purpose, and I finally understood. I was not crazy. My intuition had been right all along. The validation was immediately swamped by a fresh wave of fury so intense it made me dizzy. To see it, to see the actual physical act of her betrayal, so calm, so deliberate, it was a violation on a level I had no words for. I turned to look at my husband. His face was a grim, granite mask of rage. All my anger at him, all my frustration, all my feelings of being abandoned, just dissolved. They were replaced by a new, overwhelming wave of love and a profound, bone-deep respect. He hadn't been quiet because he was passive. He hadn't been distant because he didn't care. He had been a silent hunter, patiently gathering the evidence he needed to protect his family. He had been fighting for us in his own quiet, brilliant, devastatingly effective way. He knew his enemy, and he had formulated the perfect strategy to defeat them. "You knew," I whispered, tears of relief and love now streaming down my face. "You believed me all along." "I suspected," he corrected me, his voice rough with emotion. He turned and pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "And I am so sorry I let you feel alone in this for even 1 second. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Watching you suffer and not being able to tell you what I was doing. But I had to have this. I had to have proof that they could never, ever talk their way out of." I buried my face in his chest, holding onto him like a lifeline. The chasm between us was gone. We were a team again. We were a united front. We stood there for a long time, just holding each other. The damning footage still paused on his laptop screen. Finally, I pulled back and looked at him, my mind already shifting from victim to strategist. The question was no longer what was happening, or if I was losing my mind. The question was the same one I'd been asking myself for days, but now it was a question we would answer together. "So," I said, my voice now steady, the tears gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "What are we going to do now?" David looked from my face to the image of his mother on the screen, and his expression was one of absolute, unforgiving finality. "Now," he said, "we schedule a family intervention." The plan was simple. The execution was the hardest thing I had ever done. The next evening, David made the call. His voice was a masterpiece of neutral concern. "Mom, Dad," he said, his phone on speakers so I could hear. "Laura and I need to talk to you about Leo's care. We've been doing a lot of thinking, and we need your input. It's important. Can you come over tonight around 7? On the other end of the line, I could hear the triumphant intake of my mother-in-law's breath. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. The surrender. "Oh, David, of course. We'll be right there," she'd said, her voice practically purring. "I am so glad you two are finally ready to listen to reason." For the next 2 hours, David and I moved around our house in a state of tense, focused calm. We weren't a frightened couple anymore. We were a team preparing for a battle. David connected his laptop to the large television in our living room, testing the connection, making sure the video file was ready to play at a moment's notice. I made a pot of coffee, the familiar, mundane act, a strange counterpoint to the gravity of what we were about to do. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. We were perfectly in sync. 2 soldiers who knew the battle plan by heart. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door. There they were, Carol and Robert, standing on my doorstep, their faces arranged in expressions of solemn, pitying concern. Carol was holding a large canvas bag. which I knew from experience was filled with her arsenal of pseudoscience bottles of essential oils, pamphlets on crystal healing, and probably a few new books on the conspiracy of modern medicine. They had come armed for my conversion. "Laura, dear," Carol said, stepping inside and enveloping me in a hug that felt like being embraced by a python. "You look so tired. But don't you worry, we're here now. We're going to help you fix this." "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice a marvel of self-control as I stepped away from her. We all sat in the living room, David and I on the sofa, a united front. They sat opposite us in the two armchairs, like a king and queen holding court, ready to pass judgment. And then we let them talk. It was the final, agonizing performance I would ever have to endure. For 20 minutes, they lectured us. They were drunk on their own self-righteousness, completely convinced that our summons was an admission of defeat. "We knew it would come to this," Robert began, his voice full of paternalistic gravity. He had a stack of printed-out articles with him. The body can only handle so many chemical toxins before it begins to break down. Leo's seizures are not a sign of his illness. They are a sign of his body rejecting the poison you've been putting into it. "Exactly," Carol chimed in, leaning forward eagerly. "It's a healing crisis. His body is trying to purge the pharmaceuticals. What he needs now is not more medication, but a full detoxification protocol. We need to start him on a raw juice cleanse immediately, and I have a wonderful new zeolite supplement that binds to heavy metals in the brain." She opened her canvas bag of tricks and began pulling out small, amber-colored bottles. "And we absolutely must increase the diffusion of frankincense in his bedroom at night. It raises the body's vibrational frequency to a level where disease simply cannot exist." I listened to this fire hose of dangerous, unscientific nonsense, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard pity for them. They were so lost, so deep in their own delusion, that they had become monsters without even realizing it. They truly believed they were the heroes of this story. I looked at David. He was watching his parents, his expression unreadable, his stillness absolute. He was letting them have all the rope they needed to hang themselves. Finally, after they had laid out their entire insane plan to heal Leo, a plan that would have undoubtedly landed him in the ICU or worse, Carol turned to me, her eyes soft with condescending sympathy. "We know this is hard for you to accept, Laura," she said softly. "You've been so indoctrinated by the medical establishment, but you have to trust us. We are his grandparents. We love him. We know what's best." David chose that moment to finally speak. He let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, picked up the television remote from the coffee table, and said, his voice quiet, calm, and utterly chilling, "Thank you for sharing your thoughts, but you're wrong about why Leo has been getting sick." Carol and Robert both looked at him, their expressions of smug concern turning to confusion. "The medicine isn't failing him," David said, his eyes locking onto his mother's. "You are." And he pressed the power button on the remote. The large screen on the wall, which had been dark, flickered to life. The familiar image of our own kitchen filled the screen. "David, what is this?" Robert demanded, his voice sharp with annoyance. And then, the on-screen version of Carol walked into the frame. I watched the real Carol's face as she saw herself. I saw the flicker of confusion, then the dawning, sickening wave of recognition. Her body went rigid in the armchair. We all sat in dead silence as the scene I had watched with David a dozen times now played out in high definition on a 55-inch screen. We watched Carol look out the window to make sure I was gone. We watched her take out the pill caddy. We watched her open her purse and pull out the small, secret bottle. The only sound in the living room was Carol's own ragged, panicked breathing. Robert was staring at the screen, his mouth hanging slightly open, his face a mask of disbelief. He kept looking from the woman on the screen to his wife sitting beside him, as if his brain could not reconcile the two. The video was merciless. The hidden camera's microphone was so sensitive it picked up the soft, plastic snick as she opened each compartment of the pill caddy. It picked up the whisper-quiet sound of her tipping the real pills into her hand. It picked up the tiny click-click-click as she dropped her own fake, identical-looking pills into their place. We watched her do it for every day of the week, methodically, efficiently, without a hint of hesitation. Her expression on the screen was one of serene, focused purpose. It was the face of a woman who was absolutely convinced of the righteousness of her own actions. When the on-screen Carol had finished, when she had put her secret bottle back in her purse and placed the poisoned pill caddy back on the counter. The video ended. David hit the power button again. The screen went black. The silence that filled our living room was the loudest, most suffocating silence I have ever experienced. It was the sound of a life of denial being utterly, completely annihilated. Carol was ashen, her face a ghastly shade of gray. She was trembling, her hands clutching the arms of her chair. Robert was just staring at his wife, his eyes wide with a horror so profound it seemed to have stolen his voice. Finally, Carol broke. It was not a cry of remorse. It was a pathetic, whimpering sound of a cornered animal. I was trying to save him, she whispered, her voice a strangled wreck. Those drugs are poison. You don't understand. The doctors are all liars. I was trying to heal my grandson. I was helping him. Helping him, David's voice cut through her whimpers like a blade of ice. He stood up, and for the first time, I saw the full, terrifying force of my quiet husband's rage. It wasn't loud. It was a cold, controlled fury that was far more frightening than any shouting. You call this helping, he said, his voice dangerously low as he walked to stand in front of his parents. You watched your grandson have seizures, Mom. You listened to his mother cry on the phone in a state of absolute terror and self-doubt. You let her think she was going crazy. You watched us rush him to the doctor. You watched us up his dosage, all the while knowing exactly what was wrong. You stood by and you watched him suffer, all to prove your point, all to satisfy your own insane, arrogant, dangerous ego. He turned to his father, and you sent the articles, you encouraged her. You are just as guilty as she is. We love him, Robert finally managed to choke out, his voice weak. I stood up then and walked to stand beside my husband. I looked at the two people who had terrorized my family, who had endangered my son, who had pushed me to the brink of insanity. No, I said, my voice clear and strong and full of the authority they had tried to strip from me. You don't get to call what you did love. Love doesn't endanger a child. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't stand by and watch a mother's heart break just to prove a theory. What you did has a different name. I let the words hang in the air. It's called abuse, and it's a crime. They stared at us, two broken, pathetic old people, their fortress of self-righteousness demolished. There were no more articles to quote, no more oils to offer, no more whispers to spread. There was only the ugly, high-definition truth of what they had done, reflected in the cold, unforgiving eyes of their son and his wife. The intervention was over, their reign was over, and they had absolutely no idea what was coming for them next. The silence in our living room was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and sound out of the world on the television screen. The paused image of my mother-in-law's crime was frozen like a grotesque photograph. Carol and Robert just sat there, two collapsed, hollowed-out versions of the arrogant, self-righteous people who had walked into my house an hour before. The truth, in high definition, had shattered them. Carol was the first to find her voice. It was a pathetic, whimpering sound, a stark contrast to the confident, condescending tones she had used just moments before. We were just trying to help, she whispered, tears of self-pity streaming down her face. We love him. We were trying to save him from those poisons. We were doing it out of love. Love, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You call this love, watching him seize lying to us, lying to the doctors, letting me believe I was going crazy. You wouldn't listen, Robert finally blurted out, his face a blotchy red. He was trying to find his anger again, his last line of defense. We tried to tell you. We gave you the research. We were trying to protect our grandson from a stubborn mother who was too brainwashed to see the truth. David took a step forward, and the cold fury radiating from him was so intense. His father visibly flinched and fell silent. Don't you dare, David said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was more terrifying than any shout. Don't you dare try to put this on her. I watched the tapes from every single one of your visits. I watched you chip away at her confidence. I watched you question her every move. I watched you sow doubt and fear. all while you were methodically poisoning your own grandson behind her back. You didn't do this because you love him. You did this because you love being right. You were willing to risk his life to prove your own insane, arrogant point. He walked over to the coffee table and picked up a thick manila folder that had been sitting there, untouched, all evening. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this, he said, his voice now devoid of all emotion. I had hoped that seeing the truth would trigger some flicker of remorse, of actual shame. But I see now that was foolish. You are not sorry for what you did. You are only sorry that you were caught. He opened the folder. So, we will not be having a conversation about your feelings. We will be having a conversation about your consequences. And you have two options. He had already consulted a lawyer, of course. My quiet, methodical husband had not just been gathering evidence. He had been preparing the terms of their surrender. He placed two documents on the table in front of them. Option A, he said, his voice as cold and as sharp as a scalpel. You will sign these papers. The first is an agreement to establish an irrevocable trust in Leo's name. You will fund it with a sum significant enough to cover all of his potential medical and educational needs for the rest of his life. The second is a legally binding no-contact agreement. It stipulates that from this moment forward, you will have no contact with Leo, ever. No visits, no phone calls, no emails, no gifts, no communication through third parties. You will, for all intents and purposes, cease to exist in his life. In exchange for your full and immediate compliance with these terms, we will not provide the footage you just saw to the district attorney. He paused, letting the weight of the offer settle on them. Exile. In exchange for their freedom. Option B, he continued, his voice dropping even lower. You refuse to sign. Laura and I will walk out of this room, get in our car, and drive to the police station. We will hand over the hours of video evidence I have compiled. We will give them the reports from Leo's neurologist documenting his unexplained decline. A criminal attorney I have already consulted believes the state will have no trouble charging you both with felony child endangerment, assault with a deadly weapon because that is what a switched medication is, and a host of other crimes. You are wealthy. You are pillars of the community. I imagine a jury would be very interested in your story. You will, in all likelihood, go to prison. He looked at the clock on the wall. You have 5 minutes to decide which future you'd prefer. The choice was no choice at all. It was a checkmate. I watched them as the reality of their situation crashed down. Their faces crumbled, their entire world, built on a foundation of wealth and social standing and the unshakable belief in their own rightness, had been demolished in the span of an evening. They had waged a war against my family, and they had lost in the most absolute way imaginable. Robert, his hands shaking, was the first to reach for the pen. He didn't even read the documents. He just signed his name, his signature a weak, jagged line. He pushed the papers towards Carol. She was sobbing now. A gut-wrenching, ugly sound. But she signed away her right to ever see her grandson again. When they were done, David collected the documents. You will be contacted by our lawyer's office tomorrow with instructions for setting up the trust, he said, his voice clinical. I suggest you be cooperative. He then walked to the front door and opened it. A silent, final command. They stood up, two broken, old people. As they walked past me, Carol looked at me, her eyes full of a venomous, bottomless hatred. There was no remorse. There never would be. I hope you're happy, she whispered, her voice a snake's hiss. I am, I said, looking her dead in the eye, because my son is going to be safe now. That's all I ever cared about. They walked out the door. David closed it softly behind them, and in the quiet of our living room, I leaned into my husband's arms, and I finally allowed myself to cry. Not tears of sadness or anger, but tears of profound, bone-deep relief. The war was over. We had won. A year has passed, a year of peace, a year of quiet, blessed, beautiful normalcy. Leo is thriving. The day after the intervention, I threw out every pill in the caddy and started fresh with a new, sealed bottle from the pharmacy. Within a week, the seizures began to subside. Within a month, they were gone completely. He is back to being the happy, healthy, vibrant 7-year-old he was always meant to be. He has no memory of that dark, frightening period, and for that, I am eternally grateful. The trust was established. A significant portion of my in-laws' wealth now sits in a secure account, dedicated to Leo's future. It's a silent, monthly reminder of their crime and their consequence. We have not heard from them since that night. The door we closed is a door that will remain closed forever. But the biggest change has been in my own home. The gulf that had opened between me and David is gone. In its place is a new foundation, one built not on easy romance, but on the hard-won bedrock of true partnership. I fell in love with a kind, gentle, quiet man, but I am now married to a warrior. I misunderstood his silence. I mistook his lack of confrontation for a lack of strength. But his strength is a different kind. It's the quiet, patient, methodical strength of a strategist. It's the strength to watch, to listen, and to wait for the right moment to strike. He didn't fight their fire with more fire. He fought it with the cold, clear water of the truth. He absorbed all my anger, all my fear, all my accusations, all while silently building the case that would save us all. His quietness wasn't a weakness. It was our greatest weapon. I have never been more in awe of him. I learned so much from that terrible time. I learned that the most dangerous people are often the ones who are most convinced of their own righteousness. I learned that the claim of love can be used to justify monstrous acts. But most of all, I learned about strength. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's a mother's intuition, a gut feeling that something is terribly wrong, even when the world tells you you're crazy. And sometimes, it's a quiet husband, secretly installing a camera because he knows that in the war against lies, the only weapon that can guarantee a victory is the one thing your enemy can never spin, never deny, and never escape the undeniable truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If you are a parent out there, fighting for your child against a world that sometimes feels like it's gone mad, I see you. You are not alone. Trust your gut. Trust your heart, and protect your children at all costs. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the power of a quiet man and the righteous roar of a mother's love. And remember, true family are the people who protect you, not the people you need protection from.